Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. My top 10 quarterbacks. We're going to go from 10 to 1 for your 2022 fantasy football drafts. Whether you're playing best ball or against your friends in a friends and family league, you always want to have a leg up on them. So we're going to go over my top 10 quarterbacks. We're also going to do a separate video on numbers 11 through 20. So these are my quarterback rankings for this season. Use them as you will, whether you're somebody who likes to stack or if you're playing in a redraft league with transactions where stacking is not as pertinent as it needs to be in like large field best ball tournaments. It's good to know where you should be drafting these guys. So thank you guys for being here. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, and let's go.
He's a legend.
Let's start with a guy in a brand new scenario, but it's kind of the same, right? Russell Wilson is just going to continue to be one of the most efficient passers in the modern era of football since the passing rules have been changed. Currently, Russ is being drafted as the 9th QB on the board. I have him as my QB 10 on the season. His ADP is 78.8 right now in real money drafts on Underdog Fantasy. Obviously, I believe that the ADPs on Underdog are probably sharper than some other sites. So wherever else you're playing, or if you're playing in your friends and family league, Underdog Fantasy is going to have a little bit sharper ADP because people are drafting every day for real money and have been since May. So their ADP is updated every single day. And that's kind of what I go by. So Russ Wilson in somewhat of a lateral move going from Seattle over to Denver. And now instead of throwing the ball to DK Metcalf, I believe that DK Metcalf is a better touchdown maker, a better elevator of his quarterback than anybody that exists on the Denver offense. But Denver's offense way deeper than what they had in Seattle. It went like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then like some dudes. When he goes to Denver, he's got Cortland Sutton, who is not DK Metcalf, but you know what? He's a reasonable facsimile in terms of his play style, what he does in terms of route running, what he brings to the table, just like Jerry Jeudy potentially is a little bit younger, similar version to what Tyler Lockett can do in a bigger body, higher, more elite profile of a prospect profile, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But then behind them, they've got a really good tight end athletically in Albert O. They've still got Tim Patrick behind him. They have a burner in KJ Hamler, who again also hasn't been able to stay healthy out of Penn State for the last couple of seasons. But like the depth that exists, as well as two very talented pass catching running backs in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon III. So no matter who is behind Russ, he's going to have so many options on the field at all times to throw to. And as I said, a historically efficient quarterback in terms of touchdown percentage. It's basically Aaron Rodgers and Russ Wilson, as I've repeated for like the last 3-4 years in terms of touchdown percentage since like the year 1980. These guys have just they've been elevators of the players around them, and they've turned so many of their pass attempts, 6.1, 6.2 of his career pass attempts have gone for touchdowns. And the fact that he's got so much more depth around him makes for, the possibility for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns this season in 2022. But he's my QB 10 because quarterback is so deep this year. So my number 9 QB on my board is Dak Prescott. I mean, you look at the numbers that Dak was able to put up last year: 4,700 yards, 38 touchdowns. He ran for 2, which basically he's run for 6 in most of the years of his career. Obviously coming back from a horrific leg injury, that number was going to come down a little bit. But this Cowboys offense, even minus Amari Cooper and without Michael Gallup because of the injury for the first few weeks of the season, I'm expecting he's going to be out for the first few weeks of the season. Week 1 right now is not reasonable, they've said, but he's still got Dalton Schultz. He's still got an emerging CD Lamb as an all-pro caliber wide receiver. I like the rookie Tolbert. They have players on the outside that can make things happen, as well as possibly moving Tony Pollard into the slot a lot more often, especially early in the season, to play in tandem with Ezekiel Elliott, who's been very solid in terms of logging total numbers of catches over the last couple 2-3 years out of the backfield. So a lot of places for him to throw the ball. He has been a very good fantasy quarterback, coming in as my QB 9 on the season. Like I said, quarterback super duper deep. His ADP right now is the QB 11 being drafted at 88.4. I have him as my QB 9. My QB 8 is Joe Burrow. He has an ADP of 72.5 being drafted as the QB 7. I'm not drafting Joe Burrow unless, right? So like, I'm a believer in best ball of correlating my lineups and stacking, not so much in sit and go leagues where it's more about having the most total points over 17 weeks. But if you're playing in best ball tournaments, which most of my viewers are probably playing in best ball tournaments, whether it's on Underdog Fantasy or DraftKings or Drafters or MFL 10, whatever, no matter where you're playing, correlation is key because of the format of that league. The first 14 weeks is the regular season. Weeks 15, 16, 17 turn into a 1 week scenario where you do want to put your eggs in one basket because you have to come in like the top 5% of your playoff group in order to advance. So like, it doesn't help you to be in the top 50% to be spread out. You need to have those big weeks from weeks 15, 16, and 17, and using your correlation between your pass catchers, and he has some good ones, in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd going later in draft, somewhere around like the 9th rounds right now, and then Double H, Hayden Hurst, Helmsley going in like the 16th round at this point. You can correlate Joe Burrow very well, and I'm not drafting Joe Burrow as a standalone. If I don't pay up to get Jamar Chase and or T. Higgins early, I'm probably not drafting Joe Burrow based on where his price tag is versus what correlation I can get around him. So if I am going with the Jamar Chase in the middle of the first round and then possibly bringing it back with T. Higgins in the end of the second, or let's say he falls and I get him in the middle of the third, then yeah, I'm going to target Joe Burrow at or above his ADP. But otherwise, his price tag is really, really high versus where I have him with the other quarterbacks who are available around him. His is 72. We already mentioned Dak Prescott like 16 picks later at 88 and Russ Wilson at 78. So like, there's value to be had at quarterback. You don't have to force Cool Joe onto your team. I already talked about Underdog Fantasy. If you wanted to go play in some of the best ball tournaments that are out there, the Best Ball Mania tournament, $10 million in prizes, $2 million to first place, $1 million to second. And I mentioned that 14-week regular season. If you're the number one scoring team in total points over 14 weeks, that's another $1 million. They just opened up the Puppy 3 right here, the $5 variety. BBM 3 is $25. They've filled like 4 puppy tournaments already. One was Superflex, and then the other 2 were something else, and the other one was a short draft before the draft starts. Like, this is gonna fill fast for the $5 entry fee, 150 lineups max. Use code ALSMIZZLE, all one word, ALSMIZZLE, to get up to $100 deposit bonus on your first deposit at Underdog Fantasy. Tom Brady, he's like, he's got crazy eyes in his picture here on DraftKings. But as my quarterback 7, he's being drafted as the QB 10 on Underdog right now. Way too many weapons right now for Tom Brady to be ignored. You've got the highest producer of touchdowns at the wide receiver position over the last 3 seasons in Mike Evans. Godwin will be back at some point. They picked up Russ Gage, who's done very well out of the slot the last couple of years, and historically we know how good Tom Brady's slot receivers have done over the last 23 seasons. We have enough of a sample size to know that he targets the slot a lot. Obviously, he loses Gronkowski. He has good catching backs in Leonard Fournette and the rookie that they drafted who's going much later, Fournette, one of the top 5 in terms of targets out of the backfield in 2021. I would expect more of the same in 2022, as things probably won't change. And they will have solid tight end play, especially around the goal line with guys like Cam Brate. They just signed Rudolph the Red Zone Reindeer. They've got plenty of targets for him to go to. So these touchdown numbers probably aren't going to cease. He is not going to score you many points with his legs. Maybe, the Tom Brady 1-yard QB sneak is still undefeated. Maybe he'll get in for 1 or 2 of those like he did last year, but it's not something you're relying on. You're looking for 300 yards passing and multiple touchdowns, which he did basically all the time last year and now has all of those weapons back. So 40 plus touchdowns, certainly in the mix for Tom, with the core of pass catchers that he still has in Tampa Bay in that Bruce Arians offense. My QB6, Jalen Hurts, being drafted as the QB6 with an ADP of 63.9 on Underdog Fantasy. Look, you know what you're getting here, but it's a curious case with Jalen Hurts, right? So you're going to see a lot of these Konami code type running backs who are taking over season-long fantasy. No matter if you're playing in friends and family, whether you're playing in best ball, it doesn't matter. It's much easier in best ball because you get that floor, right? The floor of rushing yards, and to me, it's tied to the rushing attempts, really. I'm looking at quarterbacks who get 8 or more rush attempts, quarterbacks who get 10 or more, guys like Lamar Jackson who average like 11 and 12 rush attempts per game. it's really hard for these guys to fail just because of the floor of rushing yards that they have. Yet what, 1 point every 10 yards that they run. If they're logging 40, 50, 60 rushing yards every single game, and like they get, let's say, a half a touchdown a game. Let's say that they're going to score 8 touchdowns on the year, right? That's 3 points plus the 50, 60 yards. That's another 5, 6 points. You're starting the game expecting 9 fantasy points before they even do anything throwing the ball to any of their receivers. And they definitely beefed up the receiving core in Philadelphia, going out and getting A.J. Brown to go along with an emerging Devontae Smith. Dallas Goedert is really solid, and his ADP is not threatening in like the 90s right now. So not difficult to stack Jalen Hurts, but I would not go overboard because I'm not expecting them to throw the ball a ton. Looking at his pass attempts from last year, 16 games, 475 pass attempts. Now, look, pass attempts don't necessarily relate to fantasy points, especially with a running quarterback, as we detailed. But if you're dealing with a stack, the difference between a Jalen Hurts and like a Tom Brady or a Joe Burrow is I'm expecting like 625 to 700 pass attempts from those other two characters. And that way you can stack with impunity. You just go get 2, 3, 4 of his pass catchers on your best ball team because you know the ball is going to go and get distributed to all of them, and you don't have to pick which weeks one of them is going to be the big dog. It's just a matter of they're going to happen, and possibly can get 2 of those guys into your starting lineup, and some weeks 3. But Jalen Hurts, if he throws the ball approximately 500 times this year, it's going to be difficult for him to satisfy having all of a second to third round pick on AJ Brown, 5th, 6th round pick on Devontae Smith, and then a 9th round pick, 8th, 9th round pick on Dallas Goedert. So I would be careful how you stack Hurts, but by himself, there is going to be a lot of fantasy points coming out of him. My top 5 quarterbacks. Number 5, Kyler Murray, king of Call of Duty. Kyler, we kid because we care. He is going right now, being the top 5 in my list is very similar to the top 5 overall. It just is the way that it is. These guys are very clear once we get up this high on the list. He's being drafted as a QB5, but at pick 59.8, so almost, pick 60, like the end of round 5, beginning of round 6. My curious case here is with him stacking, because you're going to miss the first 6 games of the season for Hopkins, which is a problem because now you're also going to have a bye week in week 13. So you're going to be missing, if you draft Kyler, you're going to want to stack him. Obviously, Hollywood Brown is on that team, and Rondale Moore and Zach Ertz is a very solid tight end option at his draft position, like 110 overall on ADP, but like missing 7 games from a premium wideout like DeAndre Hopkins when you're drafting him in the 4th or 5th rounds, it's tough to kind of chalk that up. Now, obviously in best ball, because of the way that the format lines up for these tournaments, you want to throttle later in the season. So if you are going to draft Kyler and you're going to build it around maybe a Hopkins Hollywood stack, make sure that you go a little bit deeper at wide receiver, maybe a little bit early on wide receiver, so you can satisfy all of those needs at wide receiver. You don't fall too far behind, because you do have to finish in the top 1 or 2 depending on your league format, for whether it's BBM or Puppy or whatever else there is. You've got whatever other league you're in, you have to advance to the playoffs in order to win the whole thing. So it's going to be difficult for Kyler Murray, let's say full stacks by the time the playoff gets here, but Kyler by himself, super solid. Again, another guy who just piles on rushing yards, big time touchdown upside. So a floor of rushing yards and an upside with rushing touchdowns, as well as being in a pretty high volume pass game offense that continues to improve the wideouts as they need to in this vertical raid, horizontal raid offense as run by Cliff Kingsbury. So adding a Hollywood Brown allows them to get deep more. When they get DeAndre Hopkins back, it's Kyler Murray much better in terms of points per game when Hopkins is there versus when he's out. Ertz is really solid still. Rondale Moore, hopefully they let him run some routes past the line of scrimmage in 2022. We're hoping. Let's just keep our fingers crossed for that one. But that cadre of wide receivers, of pass catchers, way better. And it keeps improving every single year that Arizona is existing there, that Kyler Murray exists there. And now he's just signed a massive contract. So they're going to want to get the most out of him as they can. As I said, big rushing floor, big time ceiling here with the improving passing game, but it's going to get better for him as the season goes along. So if Kyler can blitz through the first 5-6 games of the year, sky's the limit on the back half of the season. My number 4 quarterback is Lamar Jackson. I know I had him higher early in draft season. I haven't cooled on Lamar Jackson. You just don't have to pay as much to get him. And I had average draft pick of 49.5 right now. Being drafted as the QB3, but like they're all kind of bunched up here, you know, with Mahomes being at like 51, Lamar being at 49, and Herbert going at 44. And a lot of their draft place depends on who's spent on their pass catchers early. The good thing for me about stacking Lamar is you really just got to pick 2 guys. You don't even have to double stack him. You can if you want, but you don't have to go with 3, 4, 5 Baltimore players. If you want to take Lamar Jackson, if Mark Andrews slides to you at the back half of the second round, you probably are going to be targeting Lamar Jackson somewhere around the 4 or 5 turn. You can reach for him if you want, and then 1 or 2 rounds later, you take Rashad Bateman, and then that's it. That's all you have to do. So a simple double stack with Lamar, very viable to go get because of the ADPs being spaced out for these players as they will. Former MVP, as we know, was injured last year, and before people start, I knew Lamar Jackson was going to get injured. He runs too much. He got injured dropping back to pass. He didn't get injured running. It's not like he got throttled and hit sticked, which all of a sudden caused him to miss a year because he ran too much and didn't slide. He was dropping back to throw a pass and rolled his ankle. So it is what it is. Injuries happen. It is the NFL. Lamar Jackson, still an MVP candidate every single time he takes the field. He missed on a lot of long balls last year, was somewhat unlucky. Some of them were his problems. Some of them were dropped by Marquise Brown. If things improve in terms of maybe just linking up on a few more of those catches and his rushing remains the same, just a tremendous floor. Look at this. If you're playing on DraftKings, you're getting like the chance at a double bonus from him on a lot of weeks. Can single-handedly win you the week in your friends and family league. And when it comes to the playoff weeks, when they really throttle him through, that 300-yard possibility, that 100 yards rushing possibility with 3, 4, 5 touchdowns that he can score or be responsible for himself, whether it's through the air or on the ground or some combination thereof, leads to some very tasty stacking opportunities, especially with Mark Andrews being probably the highest, the tight end who will possibly see the most targets this year and definitely the highest market share of targets on his team. And then Bateman, an emerging star himself on the outside. Love Lamar Jackson this year. I know I had him at 2 earlier in the summer. It's not about being down on Lamar. It's more about being higher as the summer went on these next 2 guys. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes, my number 3 quarterback, being drafted as the quarterback 4, though, on DraftKings. I didn't know what to expect from the Chiefs passing group, but the more I see of them throughout training camp and OTAs and throughout the summer, I think they're going to be just fine. Obviously, losing Tyreek Hill is a big bite, right? Like there's a few guys on the outside who are elevators over the years. Randy Moss was an elevator of his quarterback's yards per attempt, of his quarterback's rating, just making them more efficient, their touchdown percentage, everything. Because not just what that player does, but what they do to defenses that makes everybody else be in man-to-man coverage or single coverage underneath. You always have to have safeties hovering over the top of Tyreek Hill. Now, those safeties are going to be able to creep a little bit closer to the line this year, but Juju Smith-Schuster, if he stays healthy, which, you know, it's football, everybody can get injured, I think is going to be just fine. The rookie Sky Moore looks like he's absolutely fantastic. Travis Kelce, I do not care that Travis Kelce is 31, 32. It does not matter. He's still amazing, is going to be the focal point of this offense with enough athleticism on the outside. MVS also on this team to stretch the field. Now, he's not going to be as dangerous a downfield threat as Tyreek Hill was, who is a historically great downfield threat, but it will keep players honest because Patrick Mahomes is an elevator of talent of everybody else who's around him. 5,000 yards, 40 plus touchdowns, still in play. It's just going to be going to a different cast of characters than it has in the past. My QB2, that leaves Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, at the beginning of his career, has done things that other young QBs have not been able to do. Guys like Marino, guys like he has thrown for more yards and more touchdowns than any quarterback in their first 2 seasons in the history of the NFL. And that does not show signs of stopping with the offense that they have around him, coupled with the other teams in that division. The AFC West being an absolute arms race with Justin Herbert and Russ Wilson, and 3 of the guys in the league in that division are in my top 10 quarterbacks list. The totals on those games are going to be between 50 and 60. He's going to play the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going to play Denver. He's going to play Kansas City 6 times this year. And the rest of the schedule is it's not like the worst schedule in the league. So they're going to have an awful lot of opportunity. Now, there is a possibility that on efficiency, he could take a step back a little bit. Like, they got to the red zone so often last year and converted those red zone trips into touchdowns so many times last year. A player like Austin Eckler had like 20 touchdowns. His touchdown rate could regress because they weren't coming from inside the 3-yard line. They were coming from like in the red zone, 15, 20 yards out, and then running in long touch. But like, that doesn't mean that everything's going to regress for Justin Herbert. So like, volume changes everything. Now, while Eckler may not score as many touchdowns from 10, 15, 20 yards out, a guy like Mike Williams could be a little bit more efficient. A guy like Keenan Allen, who scored way less touchdowns than he probably should have last year, could take a step forward. And we have Josh Palmer as well. Very easy to get that Chargers double, triple stack, whether it's including Eckler in the first round and then Keenan in the second and then Mike Williams in the third and Herbert in the fourth. Palmer going much later, like in the 10th through 13th rounds, depending on the draft that you're in. Very easy to get 2 or 3 pass catchers to go along with Herbert. Absolutely love the ceiling with this kid. And the fact that he's going to be in so many shootouts bodes very, very well for not just him, but his pass catchers. Easy spot for him as the QB2. His ADP right now is 44.7, being drafted as the number 2 guy. And number 1, fooling absolutely nobody, is Josh Allen. The unicorn sits on top of the list once again. If I said to you, pick a quarterback that you think will score 30 plus fantasy points in a week more than 5 or 6 times, Josh Allen should probably be the number 1 guy on that list. Not only does he play in a very pass-happy offense, obviously this includes a couple of playoff games, 708 attempts last year in those 19 games, including the 2 playoff games where he threw it 37 and 25 times. So it wasn't even like he was just going nuts in the playoffs. He did fantasy-wise, 40.1, 41.9, but like tons of attempts, great pass-catching group with Steph Diggs, as well as adding Jamison Crowder. They brought back McKenzie and Gabe Davis, who blew up in the playoffs. His ADP is skyrocket. He's in like the late 40s at this point. He was going the 5th round. Now he's going in the middle of the 4th round in a lot of cases. Josh Allen sliding a little bit from the 2nd round into the 3rd round. Now his ADP is 30.8. So if you draft Steph Diggs in the 1st round, back half of the 1st round, you get like 7, 8, 9, 10 pick, and you take Steph Diggs. It's not difficult to come back in round 3 and still land Josh Allen and have one of the best, if not the best, pass catching tandem in the league. And then you can still go out and target 1, 2, or 3 more. Now Dawson Knox might step back in terms of his efficiency in converting pass catches into touchdowns, but Steph Diggs was on the wrong side of that efficiency. So maybe Knox has a few less, but Diggs has a few more, right? Diggs' underlying stats from 2021 dictated that he should have more touchdowns last year, and now everybody's favorite regression candidate is Dawson Knox. All that means is that Josh Allen's still going to throw for a whole boatload of touchdowns. He is also going to contribute with his legs, getting you a good floor with a possible ceiling. He is a massive, massive mountain of a man who is very difficult to tackle and remains a viable threat when they get inside the 5 to run a touchdown in and give you those ultimate ceiling games of 35 plus fantasy points from your quarterback. And when he does that, he's dragging at least 2 pass catchers along with him from that very talented passing core. So he remains my number 1, was last year, is again this year in 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Look out for another one right there.
He's a legend.